Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Ryan here from the CTWpodcast. Thanks for joining us again. Really overwhelmed and appreciative of the support and feedback that we've gotten from everybody so far. Kicking off episode 3 here right now with Tim Schwartz. Before we get to that, just want to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the MSWA. It's the Maryland State Wrestling Association, an affiliate of USA Wrestling. It's your place to go for in-season and out-of-season competitions. Your training sessions, clinics for both coaches and wrestlers. It's the governing body of our junior national team as well that goes to Fargo, North Dakota, schoolboy nationals, guys, off-season wrestling, especially freestyle Greco training. I can't recommend it enough. I thought it was really a game changer in my ability to take that next step as a wrestler. As I've always said, was never anything special at any point, but from being average, below average to in the mix there, it really allowed me to make that jump. And it's really the type of thing that you don't have to be a great wrestler to put in great work. And I recommend everybody look into the off-season opportunities that you could get at the high school level, and then also the in-season opportunities at the junior league level. It's also brought to you by Ground Control Mixed Martial Arts. Ground Control is the premier mixed martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing organization, and facilities for the Baltimore metro area with locations in Owings Mills, Columbia, and Rosedale. Guys, it's for everything from pro fighters to hobbyists to people trying to get in shape. I think it was an amazing choice for me when I was done. I still had done wrestling. I still had a competitive outlet that just needed to be fulfilled. And I found it in mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu. And Ground Control is the first place I went. I'm a member there as well. I love it. It's incredible. John Rallo has built up a huge thing in the mixed martial arts community. And it's got everything, again, from hobbyists and first timers to professional athletes, professional competitors. So can't recommend Ground Control enough. Now, before we get started with this one, we were with Tim Schwartz. Just to let you know, there's going to be a couple of technical difficulties, as we've been very open about. It's certainly beginners trying this podcast thing for the first time. We got to sit down with Tim, so there might be a little bit of miss where the words aren't matching up because of connection issues. We're working on that, making sure that it doesn't happen again. But we could redo the episode, but I thought getting the authentic one out there is probably what's best for everybody. So definitely wanted to hit on that. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, definitely contact us. But if not, no big deal. We're still going to bring these things out to you. And I hope you guys enjoy this. Sit back, relax, and thank you for supporting Champions That Wrestle.
Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Ryan here, along with Jason at the CTWpodcast, here with another episode. We appreciate everybody tuning in thus far. Appreciate the feedback. It's been great. I hope everybody's enjoyed the John Noggle and Keith Watson episode so far. Got a really cool guest today. I'm excited about it. He's from the Capital Gazette. He's worked with the Baltimore Sun and the Howard County Times as well. Tim Schwartz, what's going on, buddy?
Not much, guys. How you guys doing?
Great.
I'm hanging in. Yeah. Freiert's excited as always, as you can see. Super. I'm really excited about this one. This is just a really unique perspective to bring on for somebody that's still really involved with the sport, but didn't take your traditional coaching. And it feels like people that don't take the coaching route, it's unique to take the the reffing route as well, to still be engaged and still be involved. You're something totally off course on a different path. Talk to me a little bit about your experiences writing and covering high school sports and obviously high school wrestling in the state of Maryland.
Yeah, I think it goes back to my introduction to the sport, which, was my freshman year in high school in 2005. I had never wrestled before my freshman year. And I was one of those kids that I was 100 and I think I started as a freshman, like 100 pounds or something like that. And, I played baseball growing up and, that was going to be my sport, if you will. But I couldn't hit the ball barely out of the infield because I was 100 pounds. But I got introduced to wrestling because a couple of friends of mine were wrestlers, and they were sophomores at the time. They were a year older than me. So I decided the day before practice to try out and was like, well, I'm not doing anything else in the winter. I might as well give it a shot. And I just kind of one of those kids that had instant success with it. I was a pretty good athlete for 100 pounds, and I wrestled JV, and I think I only lost like 1 or 2 matches my first year wrestling, and I was like, wow, I never would have expected that. So, and I kind of just instantly fell in love with it. So realizing that I wanted to be in journalism from kind of a young age, when you realize that you're not going to be a professional athlete, I think I wanted to be around the sport or around sports in general. So one of those things, and I like to write, so I kind of figured, what better way than to be involved with both of those things to get into sports journalism. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me. I always wanted to do it. So, and just sticking around with wrestling, it was, like I said, it was one of those things that I just really got involved with my freshman year of high school and throughout, and I just loved everything about it. So I like covering high school sports a lot. You have a lot more access to high school kids than you do at a college or professional level. There's less filters. There's better stories to write. Kids aren't afraid to talk to you, and see their name in the paper is one of those things. When I actually got good at wrestling, my name was in the paper, and it was like, this is super cool. I always thought that was really interesting. Andrew Conrad at the Howard County Times and Lem Satterfield. I think he was with Digital Sports at the time. And those guys were really influential to me, and I was big fans of them. So when I got into college and went to the University of Maryland and started studying journalism, I would cover. I would shoot video for Andrew at the state tournament because it was at the University of Maryland, and I wanted to be there anyway. So it was like, what better way to put stuff on my resume and also get to see the sport and see the state tournament and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I got into covering high school wrestling.
Yeah, I think were you writing for Digital Sports? Was that your first sort of like legit writing, like journalism style?
Yeah, I think it was, who was it? CJ Malinowski? Was he the guy at Digital Sports? Yeah, maybe it might have been even Ryan Mank, who I think he runs the Ravens digital stuff now. But it was I think it was CJ. I just reached out to him. I was like, hey, I want to kind of write about wrestling. And Digital Sports at that time was kind of the bigger name, I guess you will. The Sun didn't really cover it too much. Mostly because I think everybody knew who Lem was, and Lem was a big name in the sport here in Maryland. So, I kind of wanted to be like Lem and write about it. And, again, the state tournament was on campus, and I was on campus, so it was one of those things that just was easy for me. And yeah, I think that was my first real writing gig.
Oh, so, with your job, obviously, you have to cover more than wrestling. Is there anything that it's like have you grown to love other sports that maybe you weren't as familiar with? Or is it like, does wrestling feel like recreation where covering some of the other ones feel like work?
Sort of, kind of. Who doesn't love to cover football or watch football games? And, Friday Night Lights are it's hard to get better than Friday Night Lights and cover a really good football game or a playoff game or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I always love football and watching football, so that's an easy one. But, sports like volleyball, girls volleyball, I mean, those girls are freak athletes, in my opinion. Like, I don't know how those girls do what they do. So that's one of those sports that, I wasn't a huge fan of, I guess, that I've grown to really enjoy covering and seeing and watching. Reservoir, when I was in high school, like, more people went to the volleyball games than they did the football games because the volleyball team was the only good sport at the school, as a relatively new school at the time. So I like volleyball, and boys lacrosse was one of my other beats in the spring, and I really like boys lacrosse, especially here in Howard County. The competition is so good, and now I wish I got a chance to cover my first year here in Anne Arundel County.
How did they choose your beats? Like, did you get to choose, or they were just like, hey, wrestling, you're going to do wrestling, and then it seems like you got a fall, a spring, and a winter like beat that you have to do?
Yeah, so when I was with the Howard County Times, we did have beats. That's not to say that they had beats with the Carroll County Times or even the Capital Gazette before I was there. You just kind of covered the games that were important in the big games. But in Howard County, there were 3 of us when I first started. It was Brent Kennedy, who's still the sports editor, Andrew Conrad, and me. So there were 3 of us. We kind of just split it up into beats because in my opinion, beat coverage gives you a better chance to get to know the athletes, get to know the teams, who's really good, who's really not. You kind of get more knowledge than just kind of the surface level of what's going on in each team and each sport. So, I covered boys. I think I covered girls soccer my first couple years. I helped out with some football. But when I got there, obviously, I wanted to do wrestling, but that was obviously Andrew Conrad's beat. He'd been there for, I think at that time, more than a decade, and he covered wrestling all throughout. But he was like, no, you can have the wrestling beat. So that was super cool of him, obviously. I'm grateful for that, because he could have easily said, no, it's my beat, you're covering girls basketball or something like that. And, not putting girls basketball down, but I wanted to cover wrestling, obviously. So credit to Andrew for giving me that opportunity and take the beat. I probably would have stepped on his toes some anyway, just because I really wanted to cover wrestling. But yeah, Howard County Times when I was there, and they still do, we did it via beats.
Gotcha. So is winter your favorite season as far as professionally?
It's hard to say winter's my favorite, only because the weather is awful and you're stuck in these gyms that some of them are just hot. Some of them, who wants to be really stuck in a gym all the time when you could also be outside covering a game in beautiful weather? But there's nothing better than covering wrestling to me. Yeah, I mean, definitely covering wrestling is my favorite thing.
Gotcha. So let's go back to you getting involved in the sport, and then your high school career. We'll just touch on that just a little bit. You said that you came out, and it's funny. It's obviously there's differences, but I hear what you touched on earlier. And I see similarities to even somebody like Jason. Jason, like, it was a really good soccer player coming up, and then wrestling kind of became his main sport. Both of you guys were undersized, and like you said, baseball was your main one. Just talking about that first time going into the wrestling room and what motivated you in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever wrestled was like the weekend before tryouts. My two friends, Zach Spearman and Daniel Knox, both were ended up being varsity wrestlers at Reservoir. We went to an open tournament that was like the weekend before. I think it was at Merritt's Ridge, and it was one of those things. I didn't even have a singlet. I was like in a t-shirt and shorts, and I would think I was the only kid on the entire mat that entire day that wasn't wearing a singlet. And that I was one of those kids that was like, I don't really want to wear a singlet, but and I didn't have one anyway. So I get on the mat and I get into a bracket, I think it was Madison weight classes. And I weighed about the same as my friend Dan, who I previously mentioned. He was on, I think he wrestled, he might've been a JV county champ the year before, but I ended up wrestling him in like my second match. And it was like one of my best friends at the time. And he was a good wrestler. He didn't hold anything back. He just went out there and like kicked my butt in like 30 seconds and pinned me, and I was like, this is terrible. But at the same time, it was one of those things like I got a lot to learn if I really want to do this. So I try not to let that discourage me. And I won't say at that point that I loved it, considering I got my butt kicked for I think 3 straight matches, but I did learn like this is something that I kind of want to learn. So I went out and tried out. And they didn't have tryouts. I guess you're just kind of on the team as a wrestling team. But so I decided to do it, and I instantly just wanted to learn it, and I think that's the biggest key. But also at the same time, you hear about junior league kids who come in with terrible habits, and they're harder to coach than somebody who's never done it before but wants to do it. So I instantly just wanted to learn it and tried everything in my power to get good at it. I was one of those kids that was early to practice and last one to leave. And I just really wanted to learn it.
Were you pretty athletic growing up?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was a small kid. I weighed like 100-some pounds. I hit my growth spurt like in the middle of my freshman season, so I started to cut weight towards the end of the year to stay at 103 was the weight class at the time. But I would consider myself a pretty athlete. But again, how good of an athlete can you be when you're 100 pounds? Even playing baseball or soccer or wrestling.
Hey, man, I used to think you could do okay being that small.
I could hold my own for sure, but like I wasn't going to go out into a football field and pretend like I was, a star out there, because you get hit one time by a kid who's 175 pounds and it's game over.
Well, it's funny, like you don't really notice those like size. I think high school is when you really start to notice that like, oh my God, these guys are much bigger and faster than me. And so, I mean, I'm sure, at least for me, that's what attracted me to wrestling. So I was like, oh shoot, there's weight classes. Like, I don't have to go against this guy who's like 3 feet taller and weighs like 50 pounds more than me.
Sure.
So, I mean, and you talked about your interest in the sport. I think, both Mac and I are familiar with you just from off-season stuff at Headhunters, and you were in there all the time. And I remember even when your freshman year, like learning that you just started was like pretty impressive. Like I definitely assumed that you had junior league experience when I first saw you. So, remind me a lot of Ethan Cohen, just sort of really taken to the sport. And obviously, you put in some work and were a county champ by the time you were a senior.
Yeah, it was a lot of hard work to get to that point. And, I'm thankful for you, Jason, for having Headhunters there right down the street to Hammond. Because I was not one of those kids I don't think I ever wrestled a competitive match outside of the state of Maryland. I never traveled. I never went to Fargo. I never went to these, I went to the MAWA at River Hill. And, even if I advanced, I never went to the Eastern Nationals or wherever it was held. I never did any of that stuff. So I was one of those kids that, I loved to practice. I loved to just be on the mat and learn from other people and learn from other coaches and watch other kids do it. I'll never forget watching, I think it was Vince Tawil and Asper wrestle in the state duels that year. I think it was 2005, right?
Yep. 2006.
2006, and just being like in awe. I think that was my 2005-06 was my freshman year. So, and just being in awe, like those guys that was awesome. And it's, we'll go on a tangent later on maybe about how those matches don't really happen anymore. But yeah, I mean, I just love to watch other people compete and other people, other technique that you see and how kids do this and how kids do that. And I was a visual learner, so it helped to just watch other people wrestle and be like, hey, I saw how he kind of did that, and I picked those kind of things up pretty quick. So I was fortunately a pretty quick learner in the sport.
Well, so you walk in the door at Reservoir. Your first coach is a 4-time Howard County champion, Adam Seidman. People in Howard County know the name. People in the state of Maryland probably know him more for his contributions as a referee now. He's been around and very good ref and has been around, seems like forever. What was that like, coming in the door and learning from Adam?
It was hard. He was a tough guy. He obviously very knowledgeable of the sport, but he wasn't going to, take no shit. He was going to be one of those guys that, sorry, my computer just.
No, say whatever you want. You're good.
So, he was one of those guys that just, practice was hard. It was hard. And I felt like I was a pretty tough kid mentally, so I could handle that kind of stuff. But, we started out at this many kids, and, day by day, the numbers dwindled, not to a point where it was a bad thing, but, it was hard to be coached by Adam Seidman. Unfortunately, something happened in the practice room, and he wasn't our coach throughout the season. He got into a little altercation with one of the wrestlers, and, whose fault it was, I'm not really sure. I don't really know the whole story exactly. It was also a long time ago, but, he and his assistant ended up leaving the team. I think it was like the middle or late December that year, and we were left without a head coach. And I'll never forget being on the bus going to a match, and we didn't even know who our coach was, or if we had one. We had one assistant, Coach Hall, who was on the bus, and at that point, we weren't sure who was going to be, if he was our coach, if anybody else was going to be our coach. We had no idea, but one of our volunteer assistants at that time was Ryan Kanaski. And he coached, he knows John Noggle, who I just listened to that podcast. You guys did a great job. He helped coach at Springbrook for a couple of years. And, I think he was the volunteer assistant at Reservoir that first year, 2005. And he walked onto the bus and was just like, I'm your new coach, let's go to this match. I think we went to Wild Lake, and, it was kind of a surreal thing looking back on it, like kind of crazy how that whole thing went down. But it was the start of a new era, I guess, if you will, for Reservoir. It was a tough first year because a lot of personalities on that that Reservoir team in 2005, as kind of a new school and only having one previous coach. And it was a tough year, but, looking back on it, he was the perfect guy for it because he could coach different people different ways. He wasn't a my way or the highway kind of guy. He coached me differently than he did another kid, and he coached that kid differently than another kid. And, I think that's what makes a great coach. So yeah, it was one of those, it was crazy. It was surreal, but it was maybe the best thing that ever happened because he took that program to heights that had never been before and haven't been since.
Yeah, I think he's one, honestly, his tenure wasn't very long as a coach, but, and it's a name that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with, but you want to talk about a guy that knows how to get the most out of a kid on the mat. Ryan Kanaski was exceptional. I mean, everything from motivating his kids to work in the off season. I obviously wasn't around him in season, but or just running technique, teaching technique. He was phenomenal at giving the information and allowing high school kids to receive the information and for them to be able to utilize it. And that just must have been awesome. Yeah, tell me a little bit about Kanaski.
Yeah, I mean, kid from Central Pennsylvania. He grew up in Danville, Pennsylvania. His dad is a National Wrestling Hall of Famer, second most wins in Pennsylvania wrestling history. I think his dad won more than 500 or 600 duels at Danville, all at Danville High School up in Pennsylvania. He's a chip off the block, if you will. I mean, if he was still coaching, he would be in the conversation as one of the best coaches in Maryland. I have no doubt about that. I mean, he took over in that 2005 season. And we instantly kind of changed the way we wrestled. He was not necessarily like a, ground and pound kind of guy. He was like technique. Let's teach everybody what they are comfortable with, and let's get really good at what you're comfortable with. He wasn't one of those guys that will teach you 40 different moves and, throw you out on the mat and, that kind of guy. Let's perfect, 3, 4, 5 moves from each position and get really good at them and see how things go. If you ever saw me wrestle, I had, a double leg, I had a dirty tilt from the top and a Grammy from the bottom. And, if you scouted me, it was pretty easy to beat me. But I was really good at those 3 moves. And that was a credit to Ryan. I mean, he really taught me how to do those moves and do them from different positions. And, we would be in the practice room, after practice ended and just continually working on those sort of things. So he was like a Granby guy, a tilt guy. And, fortunately those were things, I was kind of an open book because I, didn't come into high school knowing how to do these certain moves. And, this is the move that I wanted to do. So, it was a good fit for me, and we grew to become really close while I was in high school. And, I certainly wish he was still around. He's one of the greatest coaches that have been around and a better guy. I mean, and he took that program to, we made regional duels for the first time my senior year in 2009. The following year, they pulled off the biggest miracle you could argue in high school wrestling the last maybe 15 years when they beat La Plata in the state finals at 2010 season. I think they won the state tournament that year. I mean, he was up there with some of the best coaches around.
Yeah, that was a very, very good Reservoir team in 2010. But you got to see kind of like the ascension to where they came up because, I mean, when, Ryan and I were at Hammond 05, 06, those were kind of our good years and when you started out. So, and it was almost like a transition there. And it pained me to see so much of these Reservoir guys coming in to practice in the off season. And then of course, during the season, it's like, damn, they're fucking beating us now. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah. I mean, I'll never forget, I think it was the first match my sophomore year. I wrestled JV my freshman year and won the JV county title. I think I lost one match that year. And from there I was like, this is awesome. Like it's easy to say this is awesome when you have instant success like I did. And then sophomore year, I was on varsity. I think it was the 112 pounder, and I beat Josh Halper the first match. And it was like, I think he was like in the regional finals as a freshman the year before or something like that. And it was one of those things that like, man, all that stuff I did in the off season is working. And it also was one of those things that like Reservoir's coming. Like you said, Jason, like Reservoir's coming and we're going to be good. And we had a lot of kids on that team who put in a lot of work, and a lot of kids who didn't put in the off-season work, but were committed to wrestle for Canasky because everybody loved him. And he was one of those guys that you didn't want to disappoint him. And when you did, he wasn't, angry or mad, or it was just like, let's get back to work and let's get better. So it helped it was a good combination of kids on that team who wanted to get better and wanted to wrestle for Ryan. But yeah, you're right. Awesome. We were on the up and up, and it was a fun time to be around because River Hill was good. You guys were good. Wild Lake at that time was no slouch under Asmar, and there were a lot of really good teams in Howard County at that time. So it was a fun time.
Oh yeah, I mean I think Centennial was a solid team in that time as well.
Centennial was one of those teams, kind of like they have been for the last 10 years, where they have 3 or 4 hammers who were gonna be in the county finals every year, but they weren't winning a ton of dual meets. But yeah, I mean Dan Leroy and I had a rivalry. Jack Western, a lot of those guys at that time were competing, and Brian Reiser, the oldest Reiser, was around at the same time I was. So yeah, I mean, so much good talent in Howard County at that time. It was fun to be around.
Have you noticed a difference? I mean, you still are pretty involved and in the loop, and you have been for, it seems like you never look back. You've been in the loop in Howard County wrestling. What do you feel like Howard County wrestling is like now, or do you get to see very much of it with your new position?
Yeah, I mean, I've covered Howard County almost exclusively. I started my new job in the 1st of January. So I still covered Howard County all throughout, basically from all of 2019 back to 2014, 15 was my first year covering it. So yeah, I was around it all the time. And, I don't want to be one of those guys that's like, my era was better than this current era. I think everybody could probably say that going back, into the history of time, but it's one of those things where I think it's just the commitment to the sport. You don't see as many clubs these days. I'm excited you guys are starting Headhunters back up. Jason, I'm disappointed that, that this coronavirus is kind of throwing a wrench into those plans, but, it's just different now. And I don't want to say that's a bad thing because there's still, Howard County produces state champs every single year, and helps having the Reisers come through and, give Howard County that amazing name as, how many 4-time state champs there are and things like that. But it's hard to really sit down and compare because things are so different, even from when I was in school. I graduated 2009, but it's just different. I don't know how to really put it.
Look at the numbers though. Like, I think particularly your era was, I mean, you had the just in Reservoir, Calabucci's a 2-timer. I think they transitioned from the Vipers being like this dominant junior league program, and then it sort of shifted over when Ricker and Bill Smith did the Warhawks, and they weren't quite pulling all the Howard County kids. There's a lot of Carroll County kids, a lot of kids going private school. So, I mean, if you just look at the raw numbers, it's down. One year there was 10 state champs from Howard County, I think. And I don't know, this past year there was, a couple. And
yeah, I mean, I think the counter argument to that was, back then they were split pretty evenly between 1A, 2A, and 3A, 4A as well.
Right.
And now it's, you have Glenelg and Oakland Mills in 1A, 2A in the toughest region in the state, and then the rest are in 3A, 4A. So they're kind of beating up on each other. And, my 1A, 2A West and 3A, 4A East are the 2 best regions in the state. I mean, I'd have a hard time, you'd have a hard time convincing me otherwise. You can argue the 1A, 2A West versus 3A, 4A East all you want. But those are the 2 best regions. And those are the 2 regions that Howard County has to go through to get kids to the state tournament. So, I'm not discounting the fact that, if things were split evenly, that they'd have 10 state champs. I don't think that's the case, but it is a little different when you have to beat up on each other consistently.
Sure. Well, I also think that maybe, certainly I feel like back in my day, and probably in yours as well, people would send their kids to a Howard County public school at that point. It didn't seem like as many kids from Howard County were going private. Parents work really hard so that their kids can get an education. Howard County, I don't know how it is now, but at the time had a really good school system. Now it's if you're the parent of a high level wrestler, hey, we're going private school with it. I think private schools kind of take a lot off the top from those guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it now, like, would the Noggles have gone to Reservoir? I think they might, or Hammond, one or the other. I mean, you get those two kids at Hammond or Reservoir. You get, Meyer Shapiro was supposed to go to Glenelg. I mean, if you kept all those private school kids at home, all the public school teams would be obviously better. You bring up a good point in the talent disparity between the privates and the publics. I think it's a problem everywhere. I don't think it's a problem that's specifically, stuck in Howard County. I think that's just an overall problem. And, I don't know exactly what private schools are doing to get some of these kids. And I'm not saying anything's illegal going on, because I don't think anything illegal is going on. But
why? What have you heard, Tim?
I haven't heard anything, frankly. Yeah, I hear things, but there's nothing illegal going on. I mean, it's just kids are, you get an elite education.
If private schools didn't recruit, they wouldn't have anybody, they don't have a district. So, but I mean, obviously, I've talked to.
It's hard to say, if you're a top level kid, it's easy to say, I'm going to go to Mount St. Joe because I'm going to get to wrestle at Beast of the East, at Ironman, at Mount Man, at Powerade. I mean, you get to go to these schools, and, I don't like the argument that you can't get recruited at a public school, because you can get recruited at a public school. I think it's been proven time and time again. But when you're wrestling in front of college coaches, 4 or 5 times a year at national preps and, like I said, Beast of the East and tournaments like that, it's easy to say, let's go to private school because I get much better competition there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, there's no way around it. Even like, you guys had the Ham tournament forever. That was one of the best. And, you have to go through like loopholes, Mackin knows, to find tough tournaments for a public school. And
absolutely
find loopholes to go to Mount Madness, because, Haverford School in Pennsylvania is going to be there. And MPSSAA says you can't compete there because Haverford School is there. It's like, why even bother trying to – and then you got to think, public schools only get 3 tournaments a year. And you got to think about the kid, who's, wrestling in his second year and is, do you keep kids like that around when you're going to Mount Madness, War on the Shore, and, if you could Beast of the East, like those are your 3 tournaments, and then you don't even qualify for regionals because you're in 1A, 2A West, and you don't have as many regional points. You got to think about the whole team, and it's a tough thing to deal with as a coach these days, where it's easy to say, let's just go wrestle the best and just get better and see what happens. But it's another thing where, if you're wrestling for one of those schools and you don't even get to the regional tournament, and you're better than every, 6 of the kids in that would be in your bracket, it's a tough sell.
Sure. But I mean, I think the argument to that is because of the county qualification process, I think that even if you have, low regional points, now you're going to have a tough pigtail coming in, but you should, if you're going to be the type of person that's going to qualify for the state tournament or the region tournament, you should be able to place in whatever that placement is in your county in order to qualify.
I agree with that 100%. I was a kid who I was the 2 seed in my region my sophomore year and lost my first 2 matches. I think I ended up losing my last match of the season to freaking Josh Halpert again. But it was one of those things, like, was I battle tested? Did I have the best competition throughout the season? And, that easy answer is no, but and we increased our competition level as time went on, because obviously my sophomore year was the second year under Kanaski. I know you guys signed these, we're going to this tournament for 2 years and whatever else, but, neither here nor there. But, yeah, it's a tough thing to kind of balance. But I can understand the conundrum that public schools have to go through. And it's easy just to say, hey, my kid is, easily one of the best as Meyer Shapiro. Like, Glenelg would have been what better public school to go to than Glenelg? They wrestle some of the best tournaments and have some of the best competition, and but to go to Bullis School and have an opportunity to compete day in and day out against extreme competition in your own room, in addition to going to some of these top tournaments, if you're at that level, why not?
Sure. Well, let's get down to it with what you're currently doing, or what you have been doing since you've been finished wrestling. You've been writing. You said Digital Sports was your first gig.
Yeah, I
after
wrote for Digital Sports and like the Montgomery County Sentinel when I was in school, and it was cool covering some of those guys. And that was pre-Damascus running things in the county, so it was cool. Like I think I had the first like Montgomery County all county, and it was super cool feedback that I got back then. And yeah, I mean, I was all about that stuff because I didn't get paid covering anything for. I don't think I got paid for Digital Sports either. It was just for fun and getting clips and improving my writing. And
their stuff
yeah.
was like you had to get a certain number of views or something.
I
And
think it was like that back then.
Mhm.
That might be the case now, but I'm not sure exactly. I don't think I got paid by.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, I guess, now, because you've seen this, the rise of like paywalls and stuff on.
You got to eat too, man.
Hey, man, like, yeah, exactly. And I'm, being in the, publishing realm, we're completely subscription based, but it's kind of funny how you see, these people out here just expecting this news coverage for free and all this kind of stuff. I mean, does that bother you out there when you see people like, oh, you got to pay for this, or why is this, that? And
A little bit. I mean, just from like my perspective, I put so much time and effort into covering, when I was like covering Howard County and getting these coaches to send me box scores. And, I wanted to be worth the money that you have to pay to have a digital or a print subscription to the Sun and have to pay to get to see some of these things. Now, that may not be the case for every reporter or whatever, but for me, I took a lot of pride into getting the email saying like, hey, I subscribe to the Sun because of you. And, that's awesome to hear. But at the same time, it's like, we got to eat. And Jason will tell you, like, it's a different world these days with, print subscriptions and print ads and, what's making, right now the coronavirus is is killing newspapers. I mean, because what advertisements are gonna, who's gonna pay to have an advertisement, for the restaurant or something in the paper right now when they're closed? It's brutal. I'm on furlough right now I'm in the second week of a 3-week furlough from, May to July. And times are tough and it's difficult to be in this profession. It probably always has been, but, it seems like it just gets harder and harder year by year. But, while I understand it, it is difficult. And, to hear people be like, I don't want to have to pay for this. It's like, what do you get for free in this life?
well,
and you
people,
can argue news should be free, but then go ahead and turn on your TV and watch CNN.
yeah, I mean, people forget that before the internet, like all of this stuff. And it's funny to hear you like, oh, it's cool to get your name in the paper, but it's like, now it's like, you don't get like no one's hardly ever buying, your name's on the internet, and that's cool and all too, but there actually isn't a physical paper. I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, my belief is the biggest mistake that journalism ever did was ever having anything for free on the internet. It should have never been free, and then people would have never complained about it.
Yep.
Because there was that 15-year period where it was free, and now everybody's used to having free news. And if that was never the case, it would have been no different. You can't get a newspaper. You couldn't get the Howard County Times print edition for free. You never could.
Yeah, well, so what does a subscription? I do pay. I subscribe. I have no idea what it is because I'm so disorganized as a human.
You could get I don't know what they were doing. It was like $1.
You can get 4 weeks, or it might even be like 3 months now for 99
I got a 6-month subscription to the digital for $1. It probably still even hasn't like auto billed. I don't know if that is gonna pay off for this.
For people who complain about that kind of stuff, it's like you don't have 99 cents to spare for 6 months. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I don't really want to hear that argument.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily the money. It's just the hassle of, oh man,
Sure.
I have to put in all my information, all that. It's hopefully it's more that people don't want to spare the 30 seconds that it takes. But you think like what a subscription costs now. When I was wrestling, I always wanted to see my name in the paper, or if I was mentioned in an article, or whatever the case. So, hey, Dad, can I get $5? And I'm going to go buy this newspaper, or we would get it at the door, whatever it was. Like you add all those up that we go and try to cut out, or whatever the case may be. I mean, it would be much more than what a subscription costs now.
Exactly. You just well said.
Well, and what I feel like people, I mean, your dad did this for you, Ryan, and I mean, so did my dad, like cutting out like you said, cutting out the newspaper and having this like scrapbook. Like, I feel like guys are missing out on that these days, because it's all online and, just the physical paper, and it just makes it seem like a bigger deal, I guess.
For sure. Yeah, no, my dad would cut out, he gave me my senior year for graduating, which he said, I don't know if I wasn't sure I was ever going to be able to give this to you, but gave me a scrapbook that he made for me that with just, I mean, so much stuff in it, so much, like so many different articles, and they weren't even all of me, but just like of wrestling, like from the years that I was wrestling. It was really cool. Like, and I do think a lot of people might be missing out on that.
Yeah. And, Howard County Times is a little different because it's a weekly paper. But, now I'm at the Capital Gazette and we're a daily paper. We print the Capital and the Maryland Gazette. And all the stories that I wrote about wrestling are in the paper. Like you can still cut that stuff out now. You're right, Jason, like things are a little different now because it's also on the internet. It's instant on the internet. You can read it the night that I write it, instead of waiting for the paper the next day. And it's like yesterday's news is old news, right? But everything's still there. I mean, we tried to, like the all county stuff that we did for the winter season, we tried to do our best to make it something unique and special and something you could like hold on to. So we tried to, we had the whole front section of the sports cover was an entire picture of, a feature picture of the wrestler of the year, or the girls basketball player of the year, or the boys basketball, so on and so forth. So, we try to do things differently and try to keep them unique. And that's why we do like the cool profile pictures of the wrestlers of the year. Jason Reiser got 4 of them, and it's like the 4th time it's like, all right, how can we make it a little different, but
sure.
We try to make it different and unique and try to do things that are keepsake.
Yeah. And it's, so talk to me about that a little bit. Like, it did feel that, let's rewind 20 years, there was so much coverage, that, it's a little bit more difficult. You didn't have the accessibility at your fingertips. It seems like, I remember I contacted you one time about a Baltimore County all-county team, and like that had stopped. And I don't know about the other counties. I know you worked really hard for Howard County and built theirs up. Why did all that go away? Like, across the board? Yeah,
I think it boils down to resources. You got some guys that are covering, one entire county by themselves. And it's easy to say, hey, do a full all county with a feature on the athlete of the year and write-ups on all the first teamers and so on and so forth. But if you're one guy and you got to do that for, like in the spring and it's like 6 sports, I mean, and you got to put out the paper daily and still write about things that are current. I mean, it's a lot to tackle. These all counties, I think people get a misconception about them. They take a ton of time, whether it's corresponding with coaches, figuring out what the teams look like, tiebreakers, and what their record is not always as accessible as you might think it is. And some of these things are not easy, and they take a ton of time. And then you got to write the feature and talk to different people about the athlete. And I mean, there's a lot more that go into it than just on surface level. They take weeks sometimes to put all that stuff together. And I did the Baltimore Sun All Metro, I did the All Anne Arundel, and I did the All Howard County. And combined, I mean, that takes like more than a month to put all that stuff together. It's a lot of hard work. I wouldn't, and that's news to me. Like, I wouldn't have expected how much goes into it. I guess in my mind, you just have everything memorized. Well, you got to be right. Like, it's easy to say like, oh, this was his record, but like, confirm it, right? And like, what tournaments did he win? Not all these tournaments are on track, and you got to reach out to the coach. What was his record of this dual meet tournament? That
Tim actually has some journalistic integrity. He wants his information to be accurate. It's
you don't just make it up.
I know, it's a novel concept these days.
Yeah, it's hard, right? But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. So, like, talk to me about the challenges of that. I know that a lot of times, unfortunately, well, I'm not going to say that you don't get much praise, because I think that a lot of times people give
public thanks and
People
stuff like
great.
that.
Wrestling community specifically has been awesome, and I appreciate all the love that I get.
I think the vocal minority, though, it might be a little bit louder sometimes with the criticism, and also criticism leads to longer topics, but picking this guy over that guy. And do you run into criticism? Do you just like accept it? Okay, like people might not be happy about this, but I have to choose someone, and I'm only allowed to choose one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a give and take there. It's like I know what you're getting at. It's like the 106 pounds this year between Noggle and Pizzuto, right? Like that is a decision that is extremely difficult. It's draw straws basically. Like and that's not what I did. I'm not gonna. Don't take that the wrong way. However,
flip the coin. Of course, you didn't draw straws.
It's hard.
Flip the coin.
It's a difficult decision.
Who won that?
I didn't just sit there and be like, Noggle's better, I'm taking him, or Pizzuto's better, I'm taking him. Like that's not how I talked to coach.
Who did you end up picking? I didn't even see. Noggle. Okay. Even though I'm not gonna have a comment. Even though Pizzuto didn't lose, he didn't.
That's right.
Right.
It's
But
it is a very hard thing to try to do.
And my objective perspective, because like I don't have a dog in the fight whatsoever. In fact, I unless at Mount Madness Noggle pinned my 6-pounder, which I don't think my kid was there, but I don't even think I've had a kid wrestle either one of those. Like you look at what are their how'd they do at states? They're both state champions. How'd they do? Like what was their record? Well, Noggle was undefeated against Maryland wrestlers, just like Pizzuto was. So then you gotta, what do I know? I'm completely ignorant. I'm not a professional. And thank God it isn't my job to do. But with Noggle's, Mount Madness title, placement at national preps, and him wrestling at those tournaments and accomplishing it, just seems like what the tiebreak. Maybe he won on criteria Z, but it comes down to something. And I realize that there's restrictions on public schools in order to wrestle against some of the have the opportunities that private schools do, but it's not impossible. Like you can certainly find national level competition as a public school if you're willing to expose your kid to that. And unfortunately, it came down to that tiebreaker. And again, like I think that they're both awesome, and I don't envy you for being put in that position. Both are incredible. And you had to pick one that really sucks that comes down to criteria G or, whatever it was, but very, really, really tough. And what's really unfortunate is that you're not allowed to pick two. Is that correct?
So I will go sometimes to the Sun editor, and like an example last year was Pryor and Reiser at heavyweight. It's like, those are easily two of the top, arguably top 5 kids in the state. They both have to be on first team. Now, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it's not two extremely high level kids. So when that's not the case, I don't usually pick more than one. But rarely, I think last year was the first time I had 15 on first team, and I picked Reiser, national preps champ, and Pryor, an undefeated. I think was he a 3-timer or at least a 2-timer state champ?
He was a 3-timer. Yep.
It's like, how do I pick one or the other in that case? It's a little easier to pick one when it's 2 freshmen, frankly.
Okay. Right. No, that's fair. Is it? And it is though. You have to actually go and request. May I put 2 people in here? And it's something.
Yeah, because it's like it's set up, to have X amount of players or wrestlers or whatever it is. So yeah, I went to the editor and asked if I could have 15.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess, at some point with it, it's, at some point with it, it's almost like, well, if I allow 2 this time, well, then the next time you're going to allow 2 that's a little bit more cut, and then all of a sudden we're going to put in 3 people per weight every year, and we'll have, exactly. 100 people making all that.
Exactly. And I am, good or bad, I'm one of those guys that not everybody gets a trophy. I don't publish honorable mention that used to be published. I don't publish. I cut the numbers. I ruffled some feathers this year for, Anne Arundel County. I just, in years past, it was like if you won a county tournament, if you won the county tournament, you were automatically all county. It's like, well, there's 2 more weekends left. And what'd you do in the regular season? You know, like I decided that like you can't just, if you win a county tournament, you're not automatically all county. Like you got to look at the full picture. And, you know, so there were some kids for the first time in a long time that won a county title and weren't first team all county. You know, and I did my best to make sure all the coaches were aware that that was how I was going to do it. And, you know, most of them are on board, and it's like, well, yeah, I don't think it was done right before. And you end up having, you know, especially with Spalding being as good as they are, and, you know, all these other private schools that like you have 25 kids on first team. It's like, that's, you know, I don't personally operate.
That's interesting because like Howard County doesn't really deal with that. There's no, I mean, there's Glen Elk Country, but like it's the public, whereas, you know, Anne Arundel and Baltimore, I mean, you got to include, you know, Massey Joe, McDonough,
sure,
Spalding and Anne Arundel, and, you know, Severn's got some good guys, and
doing the all Anne Arundel, you know, especially only being there for, you know, from January on was the hardest of the 3 between all Metro and all Howard County. No doubt. Because you have the Spalding kids, and Spalding is probably the best team in Anne Arundel County, but they didn't wrestle anybody else in the county. So like, how do you really compare some of these private school kids versus the public school? And it's, you know, it's difficult. I can't tell you exactly how I managed to, you know, break it down. I can't say it was record or, you know, it's kind of, sometimes it's just, you know, conversations with coaches and, you know, after watching some of these kids compete, and it's difficult. It's not an easy thing to try to figure out.
Obviously you're getting criticism. What's your take on that? Like, how do you deal with that? Do you just like try not to read anything? Do you like take it? I mean, like, we're starting this podcast and we're like, yeah, give us criticism. No one's really given us much criticism, which I kind of like, you know, reach out and be like, actually you wanted a line by line breakdown of the topic.
I don't want line by line, but yeah, I only like little.
You know what I mean? But like, how do you deal with that? How, you know, I remember, I mean, when I made this criticism back when I think it was Michael Darberman won the county tournament, and he didn't make all county because I think Nakasone won states or whatever. And I remember I posted something, and Lem Satterfield was doing it at the time. 2 minutes later, after posting something online, my phone rings, and it's Lem Satterfield. And he's like, listen, let me tell you. And we had a 2-hour conversation about why he didn't pick Darberman to do this and this. And it was very much like you just said, well, you know, Nakasone won states. And I was like, why didn't you just put both of them in there? And he's like, well, I can't do, you know. So it's interesting. Like, I don't see you as the type of guy that's like calling everybody that's talking shit on the internet to explain yourself.
No.
So.
I mean, to be in this position, you got to have thick skin. And I've grown thick skin. I definitely did. You know, I heard with Nago. I was a lot like Nago with thin skin. You know, I did not have thick skin you know, early on. And, you know, Howard County, we would get some angry parents, man. You know how it is over there. You get some parent, you know, and I don't just do wrestling. I do I do a bunch of sports. So, you know, I hear from a lot of parents, and you just kind of have to have thick skin and reasoning. And that's kind of always the reply. If they really get after it and, you know, wanted me to break it down for them of why I decided why I did, you know, I can always go off of reasoning and, you know, I can explain how I got to this point. You know, you get in trouble when you're just like, well, I just thought he was better or something like that. It's like, then you're picking favorites.
Hotter mom. Sorry.
Right. Exactly. You know, so thick skin and reasoning is kind of the 2 main things there. Cause you get it a lot. I get angry. I have a lot of angry emails that are buried in my inbox, you know, and it's like, it definitely early on, I think I was like 22 or 3 when I started the job, and it was hard, but you grow to deal with it and just get over it.
Now, like the Anne Arundel County thing where you have the conflict of Spalding having really good kids, but is there a reason why they don't wrestle? Because I know Spalding, like Owings Mills has wrestled them several times since I've been coaching there. They're open to wrestling the public schools. Is there, you know, is it like they might be taking kids from the Anne Arundel County school, so those coaches, they hold a grudge and not want to wrestle them, or
they're scared?
Any idea?
I have no idea. That's a good question. I like Mike Lately over there at Spalding, and I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you there because I just, I'm still kind of new to that area, and I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, they're no, I mean, Spalding's been super great to work with every time that Owings Mills wrestled them the last 2 seasons, and it's like, everything is as they've always made it super easy. Hey, like weigh-ins or whenever you want, we'll start the match. Is this good for you? Like super good with I'm not always great at responding with communication, but they've been great, and I know that they're eager to wrestle public school teams. So that's that's unfortunate. Is there when you are actually sitting there and covering a match, does it sometimes get difficult when you're a fan of the sport and getting wrapped in, and then, oh wait, I have a job to do, like I need to write about this also? Like, is it easy? Can you be a fan and be a journalist at the same time?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard, especially I'll see kids, again, kind of like if you watch me wrestle, I had a awesome roll through tilt. I had a really good Granby and a forced roll and like a really good double leg takedown just driving through. When I see kids who wrestle like me, that's when it's hard for me, because I'll see a kid try to do like a roll through tilt and I'll be like, oh, like plant your knee, like elevate the leg, that sort of stuff. So probably like once a season, I'll like whisper to a kid, be like, hey, like you really got to like get perpendicular, like tee it up when you're in that tilt position. And like whisper to him and try to be like, I don't really want to like, like have the other coach or something like that, see me saying something like that to him. But very rarely, but every now and again, I'll whisper something to some kid and just be like, hey, and I have great relationships in Howard County. So that was never an issue for me personally, because, some of those guys, a lot of those coaches watch me wrestle. So they know I know the sport, and, being around it, covering it, and, kind of seeing matches, throughout the season for almost 15 years now, it's easy to just, Brandon Lauer is good about it. He always gives me crap about, whispering something to some kids and stuff like that. So it's it's more fun than anything. But yeah, sometimes it is hard, and you see kids like that remind me of myself, and you just want to, and those were my moves. So it's easy. I can just be like, hey, this is what you should do in the situation. But no, it's very rare.
Do you find yourself?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, do you find yourself rooting for kids at times? Like
Yeah.
with your interactions, it's you obviously build personal relationships. Even if they're just, you can tell they've got fun personalities or whatever in the interviews. Is it ever like, or especially at like the state tournament where you might not know somebody at all? Do you find yourself rooting for certain kids at certain points, or no, not whatsoever?
I wouldn't say I root for kids, but I root for situations or scenarios. I'll root for excitement because it gives me something better.
Okay.
Something to, like I think back to, some of the better matches that I've seen. And it's like, Jason Reiser as a freshman wrestling Ryan Lawrence in the state semifinals down by 2, like 20 seconds left. You're like, I'm like kind of bouncing on the edge of my seat. Like, he's got to win this to be a 4-timer, and like obviously Reiser 4-timer kind of goes synonymous with one another. And so yeah, sometimes like that, you're like, secretly I wanted Jason to win so I can, have a chance to cover his first state championship as a freshman. But at the same time, it's like, would have been a good story if he lost, like.
Yeah,
right.
I was going to say, don't you kind of, I mean, as, you were covering Howard County and now Anne Arundel, like if you're at the state tournament and Anne Arundel guy is in the finals, aren't you kind of like, yeah, man, I want to, I want this.
Yeah, you want to write about the kids winning the state championships for sure. Yeah, definitely. Like Ty Broadway this year was like so fun to watch at Serena Park. I think he won the 220 and 3-4A.
Yeah, that kid was stunning.
He was a machine. He was so fun to watch, and it's like you would have been disappointed if he didn't win it, but it's not going to change my day if he didn't win it. Like I'm there as a third party neutral guy, just watching what's going down. I don't have a rooting interest, but at the same time, it's like you want to see kids like that win because kids like that deserve it. Like you're human too.
Yeah, I think I asked you this during the season. And I think it might be different in Anne Arundel, but like you have to cover, I mean, obviously you would want to cover the top 2 teams in the county, you're going to be at that match, but there are certain matches, you kind of have to spread the love a little bit. Is there a system for, what matches you want to cover, what you have to cover, what teams and schools you have to do? Like, how do you actually decide where you're going to go?
Yeah, so I go into every season of every sport that I cover with the ultimate goal, and I know it's an unrealistic goal, but the goal is to see every team win once, right? So impossible goal, but that's what I strive to do. So, for example, like I'm going to go see Long Reach wrestle Wild Lake because one of those two teams is going to win. Those might be – no, it's true. Like, you know, and I get to write something positive about one of those two teams, right? And how often do you get a chance to do that? It's not often. You know, and I'm being a little harsh maybe and realistic though. You know, and Long Reach, credit to them because they actually are, you know, on the up and up. And Wild Lake won a couple matches this year for the first time in a few years. So, but that's kind of the way I think about it, you know, and it's same thing in every other sport. Like boys soccer, I'll go cover the two worst teams play each other because one of those two teams is going to win. I'm not going to go see the worst team, you know, play the top team or even a middle tier team because it'll either be a blowout or you kind of just know who's going to win going into it. So I want to try to see good competition, and those competition levels are different, you know, as you go up and down the county. So I go in with the same goal of I want to see every single team win at least once, and I don't think I've ever actually had a chance to do that. But I think I have had opportunities multiple times to see every team at least once. So that's the secondary goal. If I get a chance to see every team in the county or the league, then that's an accomplishment for me. Now
I'm learning a ton.
Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes that's really hard because, you know, you could have that Long Reach Wild Lake duel could be on the same day as Glen Oakland Mills. You know, it's like, well, am I going to, you know, which one of those two am I going to cover? So it depends. Have I seen Glen Oakland Mills like, you know, 3 or 4 times already? All right. Well, I haven't seen the other two teams yet, so maybe I'll do that one. Or, you know, if it's early in the season and, you know, things aren't decided yet, maybe that'll sway my decision. So it's hard coming up with the schedule, but I try not to do too much planning ahead of time. I'll try to plan my week out, you know, after 1 week is over. So I usually am like kind of a week in advance, but things change, you know, teams lose, teams win. And, you know, Marriott Ridge, for example, Howard County this year, like, you know, no offense to them, but I didn't see them coming out and winning the regular season dual meet championships. And, you know, but I got a chance to see them, you know, beat Glenelg and their winning streak. And, you know, so I'm familiar with it and I know these teams in these sports. At least I did in Howard County. It's a little newer and a little more difficult in Anne Arundel right now. But you kind of figure out who's going to be good and who's not. And you have good relationships with the coaches who give you honest things and tell you what's going on. And, you know, you get to know who's good and who's not. And so it's kind of a combination of experience, relationships, and gut.
I think, like, I've always been impressed with the work that you put in. Like, I mean, just the hustle is what it looks like. And it's I remember at the county championship when I was coaching in Howard County, that you like run to one side of the gym and set up like I don't even know what the hell it was, but like a pole with like either a video camera or some kind of like lighting thing, and then run to the other side, and then, you know, or like I'll click on something and it'll be like the top kids in Howard County. It's a slideshow that's like 65 photos that you put a photo together with every kid with a winning record or something like that.
Gotta get those page views up, Mackin. You gotta get the page views up. Get those ads in there.
But you know, at the same time, it's one of those things like going back to reasons to subscribe. Like it's stuff you can only get through Howard County Times or Baltimore Sun or me. You know, it's like you can't get. You know, that's like Mackin said. Like it's kind of the grind, right? Like I want to give people something that they can't get anywhere else. You know, and if I had more time, I'd love to do like rankings and like individual rankings and stuff like that. But Billy B does such a good job. I don't think I need to, you know, waste, you know, any skin off my back or put so much effort into that. But, you know, the team records and stuff like that, you know, and tracking down the records and, you know, the poll for the Sun is something that I've done, you know, every year as part of my weekly duties and all met and, you know, the Sun previews and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, I want to give people stuff that they can't get anywhere else. That's kind of the end goal.
Gotcha. Yeah. So like looking back, is there any match that like really stands out that you loved covering or a couple, or does it all kind of blend together? Is there anything that you really have a fond memory of that, man, I'm so thankful I was here to cover this one?
Yeah. It's hard sometimes to look back because in the moment, while everybody else is like watching it and enjoying it, I'm writing, I'm, you know, keeping score, I'm trying to remember what happened, I'm on a tight deadline. So it's like, it's stressful more for me than it is for anybody else in there watching it, other than maybe the wrestlers or the coaches. because I have a job to do. I'm not there as like a fan. I'm not sitting in the stands just like kicking back and just like soaking it in. So it is kind of hard sometimes to look back and be like, hey, what was the best match or the best, individual match or whatever it might be. But, I think the one that stands out is the 2015 1A2A state championship match with Middletown Oakland Mills. Oakland Mills was down 21-9. I think that was Jaron Smith's senior year. And that was the only year that they won the duels. Oakland Mills was not really the team to look for going into the year. I think they ended River Hill's run. I think River Hill had won like 43 straight county matches going into that season. And Oakland Mills just kind of like put it all together, and Brad Howell did his Brad Howell thing where they start out slow and they lose a couple matches at their Scorpion duels, and they got their doors blown off by Middletown, at the first weekend of the season. So when I got a chance, when I knew that they were going to wrestle Oakland Mills in the final, Middletown in the final, I knew it was going to be, it was a good story because they had lost to Middletown earlier in the year. And it was a good story because Oakland Mills was kind of like not the team that was expected to be there. But they were down like 21-9 going in the last couple of matches, and they rallied. And I think the second to last match, Jaron Smith went out there and pinned the kid in like 15 seconds or something like that to tie it at 27. And it came down to the last match. I think it was a kid, Zach Vincent, not the best kid on their team by any means, but, kind of the middle of the pack sort of kid, wrestling another kid on Middletown. It was kind of middle of the pack. So one of those matches where you don't know which way it's going to go. And that's kind of all you want when you're watching as a fan or as a journalist and, writing a story like that, where you don't, if it was Jaron Smith versus anybody else, it's like, well, is it exciting because it comes down to the last match? It's like, you kind of know how it's going to go. So, I was on the edge of my seat just kind of watching, and I think Zach Vincent hit like locked up I think it was like 0-0 in the second period and locked up a cradle and got 3 backs and, got a lead and ended up holding on. I think he won the match like 6-2 or something like that. But, anytime a state championship match is tied and comes down to the last match, it's kind of the one that stands out to me. And obviously, Cornell, because those guys go at it every year, it seems like. And, while the scores of those matches are always, indicate kind of a blowout, anybody who's watched those teams go at it, it's like 1 or 2 matches go the other way and you're right in it. So anytime those two teams get after it, it's pretty exciting.
Now, what about, like, you talked about how much fun it was to watch Ty Broadway wrestle this year. Any other wrestlers? Now, obviously not rooting for them. We touched on that. But just you enjoy watching these kids wrestle. Do you have, like, a short list of guys that, man, he was really fun to watch?
Yeah, I mean, the first one that comes to mind is Jason Reiser. Just to comment, after, I wrestled kind of the same era as Nathan. Nathan was a little bit younger than me. And I saw Brian wrestle, and I saw, I got a chance to cover Austin most of his career. So just kind of seeing Jason be like the perfect mix of all of them, and like the tenacity of Austin and the technical ability of Nathan, and, just kind of seeing like the last Reiser or the second to last Reiser just like be one little piece of all his brothers was really cool to watch, and see him like lose at Mount Madness a couple times and come back and win it. Just kind of him dominating. Obviously, he didn't get very many competitive matches in Howard County, so you really only got a chance to see him compete at high levels at Mount Madness or at the state tournament. But he's kind of the first one that stands out. And Ethan Smith, his 2 years at Aberdeen and Sparrows Point, like, I mean, he was on a whole other level than everybody else at that time, and it's like, where did this kid come from, sort of thing. And it was fun to kind of see him just go out to the state tournament. I think he had like I don't know if he had a tech in his first period in his senior year state finals, but I think it was close. Jaron Smith, his senior year at Oakland Mills, he was a 2-time state champ, and he came back from an injury as a sophomore to win his first state championship as a junior, and just kind of see the progression that he made. He was one of those kids that put a lot of work into the off season. He's one of those kids that stands out. All the Reisers, obviously stand out. And my first year was Miles Martin at McDonough.
Right.
He was a senior my first year covering it. So yeah, I mean, I didn't get a chance to see him compete necessarily at in close matches, if you will, but he did wrestle Jaron Smith at the Senior Classic, and Jaron almost took him down. It was like super exciting, and then Miles kind of put it on him, and Jaron had the asthma or something like that. But no, it was one of those are the ones that stand out the most.
Nice. Yeah, it's so which Reiser's the best? You've seen them all.
That's tough. I mean, it's hard to go against Nathan considering what he ended up becoming, and ACC Freshman of the Year and All-American. So it's hard to go against him, but Jason's career is not over yet either. And I think Jason, like I said, it's just Jason being like the combination of all of them was really unique to me because they were all a little different. Like Nathan, like I said, was very technical, and you guys know him probably better than any of the other Kreisers. He just was a machine out there. And Austin was like the bulldog. Like he would run through you. And speaking of matches that stand out, seeing Austin in the regional finals have a kid get disqualified for stalling 5 times because Austin broke his spirit and his soul in half was like, one of those moments you'll never forget. And that was who Austin was. But Jason just being like a little bit of everybody was pretty unique. So it's hard to say who the next one was, but right now it's got to be Nathan because he's an All-American. But Jason, I think has a chance to be right up there.
And there's still another little one in junior.
Cal. Yeah. And it's funny because I get a chance, Jason being a four-time Howard County or 3-time Howard County Wrestler of the Year, and Austin winning it. Seems like every year I was writing a feature on a Reiser kid, so I know that family probably better than any other wrestling family. But it's funny, just like year by year, it's like, oh, how's Calvin doing? And when he's in like fifth grade, it's like, oh, he plays soccer. He's not really big into wrestling yet. And the next year you go back and he's like, he's starting to like it a little bit more. He's getting a little better. And the next year he's like, oh yeah, he's like traveling to these tournaments up and down the East Coast and he's getting good. And then the next year he's like, yeah, he's like really good. And it's just funny, like the progression of like,
he's doing the progression of it.
It's like Cliff is amazing with those kids. Like he doesn't push, you think of those Kreisers as like the ultimate machines, right? Like Jason ran cross country his senior year just cuz. Like he stepped on the mat maybe like once or twice the fall before his senior year, and Austin played football and broke his thumb as his senior year. Like you guys do whatever you want, and if you don't want to wrestle, don't wrestle. You want to play soccer, go ahead. Like I give so much credit to Cliff and the way he handled those guys, and the burnout factor obviously hits everybody at some point if you're wrestling for that long, but he just gave them such an opportunity to step away from the sport and do something else that you want to do. And it was never pressure to, you got to wrestle, you got to do this, you got to do that. It's like, you do whatever you want. You want to go to private school, go ahead. Like I've had those conversations with him. It's like, why aren't these kids at private schools? He's like, if Jason wanted to go to private school, like I'm all for it. Like, go ahead. Like you don't have to be here at Centennial if you don't want to. But those kids, like, they value their friendships and they value, wrestling at Centennial, and it's just a very unique family, and I give that family so much credit for the way that they handle those kids.
Yeah, I mean, and that just goes to prove that you can, obviously, Nathan's All-American, these guys going down to Campbell, and it proves that you don't need to be going to these private schools to make a career in D1 and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, Centennial is a pretty good school, so that's probably yeah, I mean, that's probably the my favorite part about, Cliff and what he's done is he was never like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. He's like, no, we'll be good. They'll work in the off season. They'll, find good practice partners, and clearly they.
Oh, he knows the recipe, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're a parent out there and you have kids who want to wrestle or want to be great, it's like Cliff is the ultimate example of how to handle something like that. And he's got like a million kids, so it's easier when you get good at it and you figure out what works for this one and maybe it doesn't work for this one or whatever it might be. So he has a little bit more experience maybe than everybody else. But yeah, I mean, if you're not sure how to handle stuff like that, I would give Cliff a call, and I think you'll get a perfect answer.
Do you know at all what's going to happen with like Colot leaving? Obviously, the Reiser family is very pro Colot. Colot going to Navy. Are they able to follow him there? And if they are allowed, do you see any of the Reisers making that transition to a service academy, or do you not know?
So Austin only has 1 year left. I can't foresee any scenario where he leaves Campbell. This is just, I haven't had conversations with Cliff about it. Jason, so from my understanding of the Naval Academy, if you transfer there, you're automatically a plebe. You're a freshman. You can't transfer credits. You can't go to the Naval Academy and be there for 2 years and graduate. Like you start over if you go to the Naval Academy. So that's why it's a tough situation for anybody to transfer there. They get very few, if any, transfers to come in. And if they do, it's usually somebody who just finished their freshman year, and that, I guess that would be like their redshirt year, if you will. So I can't foresee any scenario where Austin follows him because he'd have to start over. I don't think he's going to spend 4 more years in college. Jason, I think, has a chance, I guess, but I don't know. I don't know if, the Naval Academy it's not just college, man. Like that's a lifetime commitment, like that's I don't think you can expect Kerry Colott to go there, and win national championships because you got top 5 would be amazing, obviously, but it's damn near impossible to go to a service academy and compete for a national championship because you have to get certain kids.
I think everybody was shocked at that move. I mean, it was very interesting. Is the whole Naval Academy side is that under your purview of all, being in Anne Arundel County and the Capital Gazette?
Yeah. So one of my colleagues is Bill Wagner. He's been covering Naval Academy sports for like 30 years. Like he's the Navy sports guy. So I've learned a lot from him, and he's been awesome to me in my transition, and we've become really close and good friends. But yeah, Naval Academy, we cover Navy sports.
It's funny that
going back, I too was shocked when Colott, when Wagner texted me and was like, "It's Kerry Colott." I was like, "What?" Like, but once you get past the initial shock, it's like that really does make a lot of sense because Kerry is one of those guys that would always be looking for the next challenge. Like it would be easy to go to the Big Ten or to the ACC or whatever it may be, and when does Kerry Colott ever take like the easy route? Like he's always looking for a new challenge and something else, and kind of build something else. And, the Naval Academy, I think, is like a perfect fit, personality and what he's trying to accomplish.
I think also if we rewind a few years, maybe a little more than a few now, I think when he took the job at Campbell,
people said the same thing.
Yeah. And I'm super excited to see what Colott's going to do at the Naval Academy.
Yeah, and I think, expanding, I think it'll touch all levels of the sport here in Maryland. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he has a regional training center at some point, and he's attracting high-level guys to come compete here. I think you're going to see Kerry Colott become much more involved. And obviously he was extremely involved when he was here in Maryland. He was the club when I was in school. I was terrified to go up there and try to earn a spot on his team because I don't think I was at that level. But I think Kerry Collott's going to do amazing things here in the state of Maryland for all levels of wrestling down to the youth.
For sure. I think his influence on Maryland wrestling for the time that he was here was incredible. And you could see it, the proof was in it and just how accomplished some of the kids coming out of Maryland were. So the wrapping up here, where do people find you? Where, on social media or, where can they check out your stories?
Yeah, it's funny. Wrestling Twitter is like non-existent, right? Like wrestling Facebook is huge and very popular, but nobody's on Twitter. And I'm a big Twitter guy.
I'll tell you this. When I wanted to follow the matches, like I was all over your Twitter feed, dude, because you would go the weight class by weight class. And, if I couldn't make a match and I really wanted to see it, it was, so I'm following.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's weird. Like I'll post the stories and stuff on Twitter and get like no engagement on any of my posts and like nobody's retweeting it. And, like kids are like, for some reason, high school wrestlers are just like not on Twitter, but every other sport, like there's kids that are all over Twitter. And I don't know, it's just like, it's a totally different audience for high school wrestling. So it's, going back to job responsibilities and stuff like that, like social media and sports go hand in hand, but it's different kinds of social media. It's, football is like, you post something about football on Twitter and it blows up and everybody reads it and you find all those kids and you get all the engagement. Wrestling is like not there. It's just I don't have a good reason or an explanation for why. But none of these kids are on Twitter. But Facebook, thank God, you guys started that Facebook channel, Maryland Wrestling Uncensored, and you get a lot of crazy people there now. But early on, it was fun, and you get a lot of engagement on the posts.
Early on, it was fun.
You got a lot of crazy people there now. It's fun, but man, you guys got to You got a lot of crazy out there.
Yeah, well, I think it's getting crazy because there's nothing going on, man.
That's probably
I
true.
mean, so I mean, yeah, where you're just there's not really much you got going on right now because there's no sports, right? I mean, you're gonna be
Yeah, it's hard, man. Yeah, it's a difficult time, professionally and personally. It's like, I got into this business to cover sports and be around sports, and my downtime is spent watching sports, pro sports and things like that. It's like, and now you rip it all away, and you rip it away from my profession too. It's like, it's difficult. It's been tough, emotionally and mentally. But I just hope we can all get through this, and I'm still here when we get back, and we have football in the fall and wrestling in the winter and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully everybody that your favorite writer and favorite reporter is around, and we all make it through it.
No, and dude, yeah, I'm sure everybody go out there once wrestling season comes back around. Subscribe to wherever Tim's writing. He's really working his ass off to bring and give exposure to wrestling in Maryland. We're gonna wrap this thing up. Tim, I really appreciate you coming on with us. I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll come back. I think there's a lot of other things that I'd like to pick your brain about. But we don't want to drag on, all day, which I'm sure that we're capable of doing. 3 wrestling fans getting together.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you. Hopefully, once we actually have some like live sports to talk about, we can have you back and get going. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, consider me a recurring guest. I'm happy to come back.
Awesome.
And hey, if you have a subscription to the Sun, it gets you all the Capital Gazette, it gets you all the Howard County Times, it gets you all that stuff. So people are confused, like, oh, I don't have a subscription to the Capital Gazette, but I do have one for the Sun. It's all under the same.
So do you know if someone clicks on one of your stories and then like it gives you the ad and then they sign up right then, do you like get credit for that? Or they're like, hey, you had X number of signups directly from your stories, or you just not even care?
I think at a deeper level, it does. They do track that.
Mm-hmm.
And they have. So I think we've got into the company-wide has gotten into Google Analytics, and I think it can track the fact that you subscribed through this story. So if you do ever subscribe, click on one of my stories, and
that's what I did. I think I had, my 3 article limit was up, and I was like, oh shit, it's only November, 20th or whatever. I guess I better subscribe. So, thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, happy to be on, guys.
Cool. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. There's another episode of the Champions That Wrestle podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.